I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Welcome, everybody. It's Ron here from The Truth About Addiction. Today's guest is Chris Sellers, artist, young guy I met a few years ago now. Well, it must be best 9 years ago.
Yeah.
8 or 9 years ago, I met Chris, and his art's unbelievable. I really like his art, and anyone that knows me knows that I'm a bit of a art collector. I love my art, and and I like it even better if I know the artist, because nearly everything I own, I know the artist. I just don't go and buy something because it's pretty on the wall. I go and buy it because even my tattoos, I collected the artist more than I did the actual art, So welcome, Chris, and thanks for coming to The Truth About Addiction, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Tell us the Chris Sellers story, brother.
All right. I kind of want to start towards the end of my alcohol dependency, my alcoholism. It's kind of where everything started. So I'm 30 now. I've been sober for about 2.5 years. I did have a relapse period, but it was really short, and it was kind of something that really woke me up to my problem, and that's something that I will be getting into. But I kind of just want to start from the beginning. So I started drinking when I was like 15 years old. I experimented with liquor, beer, all types of stuff. Like I could drink pretty much anything. I felt like that alcohol was the answer to all problems because my social anxiety, any type of confidence that I lacked, I felt like the alcohol was that solution. And so figuring that out at a young age, I really relied on alcohol as the solution, the answer to everything. And then, of course, like all my friends were getting into drinking and drugs, and I was getting into drugs. So, I mean, it's what a lot of people do when they're growing up. You don't really think anything of it. And as I started to get older, like there was an obvious difference between me and the people I was around. Like I drank way more than other people. I could binge drink for days on straight. I could drink at 7 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, all the way through till midnight. Like there was no stopping me. And so over time, it was just something that I accepted. Like I could never imagine my life without alcohol. And of course, like the alcohol led to other things. Like I smoked weed, I did coke, I experimented with all different types of things like ecstasy, everything. And so this basically went on till about I was 27 years old. And I had already had one DUI prior to being 27. It was like 3 years prior to me being 27. So I was like 24 or something, got my first DUI. It's always a slap on the wrist, especially in Florida here in the US. Like it's just kind of like you get your first DUI, you spend a night in jail, and it's no big deal. You go through some programs, you go through probation, all that stuff. I was living in Jacksonville, Florida at the time, and I ended up moving down to Tampa, Florida in order to pursue my BFA, my Bachelor's in Fine Arts. And I did my first semester, everything was fine. And during the break between semesters, I decided to spend time with some old friends in Jacksonville. My mom had actually moved to Tampa with me, and she was in the transition of moving back to Jacksonville. So I was spending time with her, doing different stuff. But this was around the time where my alcoholism was at its peak. Like I was binge drinking every single day. I pretty much got to the point to where I could not function without alcohol. And even when I got my first DUI, I was like, I would never drink and drive for the rest of my life. I learned my lesson. And in order to function in society, I had to drive. And as an alcoholic, it was just kind of like, do I stop driving? Do I stop drinking? I couldn't do either. So I decided just like, who's going to catch me? I'm such a great driver. Last time I got my DUI, I was angry. So I was speeding and I got pulled over. I'm a great driver when I'm drunk. And so I had been, prior to my second DUI, I was drinking like 3 days straight. The morning of my DUI, I was drinking tequila, rum, IPAs, regular beer, all different types of stuff. Got into a fight with my mom, got into a fight with some friends. It was just like terrible weekend, terrible day. And it was the day before the next semester at my school. So I was like, okay, well, it's time to go back down to Tampa. And I was just obliterated. Like I was so wasted. I should not have been driving. And so on the way home, in order to stay awake, I decided to get a 12 pack of beer. And then by the time I was taking a bunch of back roads, by the time I had to hop on the interstate, I felt fine. And from that point, when I hopped on the interstate to my DUI, all I remember is getting on the interstate and then colliding with a semi truck. I was driving around 85 miles per hour. I basically like went underneath the semi truck and swerved back out. Like there were when I ended up looking at my truck, my pickup truck, there were tire marks, like black skid marks on the tire. I busted my front axle. I smashed the window. Like the front right side of my truck was smashed in. I had swerved across 4 lanes while I was asleep and hit this semi truck and swerved back while everyone is driving on the interstate at midnight. So the fact that I could have hit somebody, I could have killed myself, I could have paralyzed someone. Like there's so much that could have happened.
Yeah.
And so after I had gotten in that wreck, I was acting so stupid. I was like, oh, well, if I run from the scene, they'll never find me. So I tried to run from the scene. And then I ended up thinking that, well, they're going to check my tag. So I should go back to the truck and grab my tag off the truck and then run back. And so when I went to go back to grab my tag, I got exhausted. And by the way, like we're talking about, I'm in the inside of the interstate. So in order to flee the scene, I ran across 4 lanes across the interstate. And I was like playing Frogger through these cars, like it didn't even phase me. I was just hopping through cars. Cars are honking at me. Like it's a very blur um what I can remember of it. Like it's all kind of a blur, but I do remember it somewhat vividly. Um, and so I was just like, oh, I'm tired. I'm just gonna sit in the car for a minute. And then a state trooper pulls over and starts talking to me. And I have like an open beer in my cup holder, a crushed can on the floor. I have a case of beer in the back. My truck is totaled. The semi driver was basically like, yeah, this guy reeks of alcohol. So the state trooper ends up like doing a sobriety test on me. I did the breathalyzer test. I blew a .318. So I am not only lucky to be alive from the accident, but I'm also lucky to be alive from the amount of alcohol that I drank. I'm not a big guy. So the fact that I could consume that much alcohol and be fine was very scary. Ended up going to jail that night, and I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, I'm probably going to get out the next day, just like my last DUI. And once I was in it was in pods instead of cells. So I was in there with like 50 other guys. And when I was in the pod, like I wasn't hearing about my court date or anything. I had like a pre-trial and they pushed it back a month later. So I didn't know when I was going to get out. I was doing the law library thing, trying to research what my penalty might be. It was looking at like 3 months to a year. They were still doing investigations. They were starting to assume that I might have ran someone off the road, possibly killed someone. So now I'm looking at like 15 years in prison. Like terrible. I'm freaking out. And there's absolutely nothing I can do. Like I'm in jail. And all I have is just time to think. And my mom is just like freaking out. She's crying every single day. Like no one really knows I'm here. Like it's just I feel like a terrible son. I feel like a terrible person. Like the next day was school and I was going to a really good university. So it's like all this stuff is just making me think and I'm doing all this reflecting. And to be honest, like I got to the point where I was just breaking down, like I don't know what I'm going to do. And to be honest, like I grew up in a Christian home, but I never really knew God. And while I was in jail, it's like all you have is like yourself and your spiritual awareness. And through that, it was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I killed someone. I don't know if I'm going to prison. All of the inmates around me are saying that's going to be terrible. Not to mention, I meant to say that um, it was 2 DUIs within 5 years. So the penalty is really hard here for 2 DUIs in 5 years. So, like, you had property damage, all this stuff, blowing 3 times over the limit. Like, the penalty was just like, it could have been so harsh. And so basically at that point I was like, this is it. Like, I have to accept being kind of like the word institutionalized. Like, I have to accept that this is going to be my life. I don't know if I'm going to prison, but I might as well get used to it. So, like, I'm just getting used to the lifestyle of being in jail. And it was one of the roughest jails in Florida. So, like, you have racist people, gang members, all this stuff, and I'm just trying to get by. Um, and this is kind of where the whole art thing comes into play because, I mean, Ron, I was always interested in art. I showed you my art back when I visited you in Australia. Like, I always had an interest and kind of a hand at art, but I never really took it as seriously as I should. And when I was in jail, I realized that everything was taken from me, like my pride, my possessions. All I had was myself, my knowledge, and my skills. So I started to draw. And by drawing, the other inmates are like, bro, you're so good at drawing. Like, I'll trade you food for a drawing, or like, I need to send something to my baby mama, my girlfriend, my mom. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just draw for all these guys in here. And then it got to where people wanted me to draw tattoo designs for people. And like, so I'm starting to get kind of like this reputation of being a really good artist in jail. And I'm not just like doing like typical like tattoo style drawings. Like, I have this background in fine art, so I'm able to pretty much do anything anyone wants. And it was that moment that I was like, you know what? This is something that I need to pursue fully. Like, I've had everything taken from me. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen to me, but I feel like God is showing me something. Like, I was born to be an artist. He's blessed me with the skill to be able to share it with other people no matter where I am. Like, I don't know, they always say that like your knowledge and skills are the only two things that they can't take from you. They can take everything else. And that's when I realized this. And I was just praying like every single day. I'm just like, when I get out of here, I'm never going to drink again. I'm going to be straight. I'm not going to smoke cigarettes again. Like, I'm just going to be completely clean, and I'm going to pursue art because another funny thing about it is like we fear the things that we have control of, but when you're at that rock bottom state and you have nothing, then you feel like that if you just had a little bit of that freedom, then you could do anything you ever wanted to do, and like nothing could put you back there as long as you don't end up in a similar position. The sky's the limit. And like, and I wasn't even in jail that long. It was like 30 days or like 32 days, but I had so much time to think. And like, it wasn't like I was selling drugs or something to where I was like, oh, I'm risking going to jail. I was an alcoholic who drove and got in an accident while falling asleep.
Yep.
So like, it was totally unexpected, and I'm fearing for my life in this position. So to recognize these things, wanting to be an artist, realizing that even if I'm in jail, art is getting me through. I started gaining weight because I was eating so much more and I was trading people drawings for things. I ended up becoming a trustee, and people were taking things from outside of the jail and bringing them to me, like highlighters and permanent markers to push my drawings further. Like, I felt like I had this control over my life again. And it was something that I could always do, but I kind of ran away from. I didn't believe in myself. I worked dead end jobs, like all this other stuff. So when I got out of jail, I'm just like, all right, this is it. I'm on probation. They ended up, because I was going to a good school, I had good grades. They were like, okay, well, we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll put him on probation, but you're going to be subjected to random drug testing and you have a revoked license for 5 years. So I can't drive for 5 years. And I was doing random drug screenings at like 5 in the morning, like jumping through all these hoops, paying thousands and thousands of dollars a month, just trying to get through probation. Ended up getting through all of that after the year. And I was kind of like, I felt like I was in a really fragile state because of all the stuff that was happening, and I was learning how to live sober when I had lived for so long as like an alcoholic and abusing drugs that like things triggered me all the time. I always felt like if I got into an argument with someone, like I felt like I was taking it overboard and I just wanted to smoke cigarettes or I just wanted to drink alcohol or smoke weed. And it took a really long time to get used to that. Um, but I wasn't I still hadn't relapsed yet. So I was still in that weird, weird, unstable state of mind where like I hadn't fully accepted my problem. And in the back of my head, I was like, you know what? At the time, I was like 28, 29. I was like, you know what? I could kind of handle my alcohol. I think that if I was in like a better state of mind, maybe if I was in a solid relationship, if I was more successful, like maybe if I was like 50 and was established, I can drink again. Like it's no big deal. And because of that, in the back of my head of knowing that it's still okay to drink, but not right now, it was just a matter of time until I'd relapse. So I was in this relationship and she didn't really understand my alcoholism. She was also a lot younger than me, so she didn't like fully grasp what I was trying to express to her. And I was like, "Well, I'm happy." So she drinks with her friends. She seems cool. Like maybe I can just have some drinks every once in a while with her. And the first night that I drank with her, I went overboard and I started throwing up. And like I went back to my studio at school and like I got like a pack of IPAs there, ended up passing out at the school, throwing up in my studio, waking up the next day. I could barely make it home because like when I have hangovers, I drink so much and my hangovers are like I feel like I'm dying, like my organs are decaying and I'm throwing up. I can't drink water. Like it's just so gnarly. And so, I was like, well, maybe I just like didn't have a tolerance, whatever. And then I would drink every once in a while, like 1 or 2 beers or something. But the majority of the time during this relapse period, it would always end up as me throwing my guts up and just like taking it overboard and reacting in ways that weren't how I'm used to reacting now that I'm sober. And so towards the end of my relapse period during this time, uh, I was working on a painting and out of nowhere, I just like got angry at the work I had been making. It was like this large 6 foot by 4 foot painting that I was really proud of. And in the middle of it, I just started ripping it up. I grabbed a knife and started just like cutting at it. And then I don't know, I was just like, why am I making these things about this past? And I'm so angry and blah blah blah. So I ended up going to my studio and tearing up all my paintings. And I had like 5 completed paintings that I considered pretty solid masterpieces for the level that I was making work. Like I finally discovered something like using this. Like I was making work about kind of like my past life, like relationships and addiction and all this stuff. And sober, it made sense, but drinking, I felt ashamed. And so I ripped them all up. I was like, oh, it's fine. I ended up cutting my hand on the blade and I was just like pouring blood. I was like, oh, it's fine, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember much the rest of that night. Next day, I wake up and all my paintings are ripped. I'm like, what the hell did I do? Like, what am I going to do? All my paintings are ripped. Like, I'm in an advanced painting class. How am I going to fix this? So I ended up trying to sew all my paintings back up and like there would be gaps and I would fill it with gesso and then paint over it with oil paint and it was evident in the work. I couldn't avoid it. So I ended up just kind of being like, you know what, maybe I can, like, my work is kind of like the extension of my past life. Like, I'm making pieces about addiction and relationships and all this stuff. So maybe I can say that it was intentional. And then I ended up having like a critique, and everyone's like, oh, it's interesting, it's interesting. But the rips were definitely not intentional. So it was like, I was like, okay, I feel like that if my work is this extension and the the cuts are a literal conceptual extension, whether or not I want to accept that. Like, I literally got drunk and ripped up my paintings and
Mm.
tried to fix them. And like, conceptual art is kind of about that for artists. Like, it's about kind of like taking a subconsciousness. Like, even when you look at the abstract expressionists from like the mid 90s, like, they were using forms of expression and putting it on canvas or putting it in sculptures. I was like, this could actually like be a tool. How do I figure this out? So because I stretch canvas from raw canvas, I ended up starting all my canvases from scratch, my new ones, ripping them up, sewing them back up, like playing with the different threads and stuff, like really just kind of like pushing the idea. And I felt like I was onto something. Um, and it was starting to make sense. And so like with the whole art thing, I was like, okay, I'm onto something, but I still like my whole alcoholism thing, like it was just kind of flaky. I was depressed. Like it was still all around that same time, like post relapse period. And this is really like this is where it really hit home for me. I feel like I'm kind of talking around, but it's so exciting and I get like so stoked
Beautiful.
talking about it that I just like jump around. But anyway, so after all that stuff, I'm figuring all this out. I'm figuring out my addiction and my alcoholism. And the relationship that I was in that kind of like led me into my relapse had ended. And I felt like I had nothing. Like I had lost my sobriety kind of over somebody, but in AA, like it's really not about anybody but yourself and accepting that. But I didn't really know about any of this stuff. So I got into therapy. I was like, all I can think about is drinking. I lived by myself, so I was always alone. It was still kind of like post-COVID time, so people were kind of sketchy about going outside and being around people. So I was like, I'm just gonna like attend therapy. And I started doing therapy sessions, and it was with a therapist that specialized in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mhm.
And she told me about the big book of AA. So she told me specific chapters to start looking into.
Chapter
And
5.
where do what?
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5?
Yeah, the director. If only people would do what I wanted, everything will be okay.
Oh yeah,
I love that
exactly.
section. Yeah.
I don't remember what chapter it is, but this is where it really kind of like hit home is an alcoholic uh picks up where they left off. So like you can spend your entire like you could stop drinking in your mid 20s and pick up in your 60s and you'll just pick up where you left off.
Yeah.
And it was recognizing that first day that I started drinking. And even though I didn't have a tolerance, I was drinking as if I had been drinking the entire time. I was trying to handle my alcohol to that extent, and I was continuing to drink that much, if not like twice as bad. And my depression was worse. My hangovers were worse. Like everything was so much more intense. And by reading that in the big book and my therapist showing that to me, it's when it really made me realize like I have to learn how to be sober for the rest of my life. Like I have this illness, I have this disease. My brain doesn't function the same way as other people who can drink.
Yep.
Like when I leave the bar, I have to get a case of beer. It doesn't matter if I'm with someone or not. I have to get a case of beer and go home. I have to buy a pack of cigarettes and chain smoke them all night. Like do all these things that are really abnormal for people who just go out with friends and have drinks. And then like I'm calling like a coke dealer or something, like just going way off the deep end.
Yeah.
So by recognizing that, she also said that you can't really think of your life as like having control over like the larger picture, but thinking about it more as like taking it day by day. Like I'm waking up today, I'm not drinking today. And like how can I avoid drinking? And when you do that, it becomes less overwhelming, and then you can kind of like focus on your happiness for the day. And then over time it kind of accumulates into this foundation for yourself. And then like um so by kind of doing that, I was able to kind of like get my feet back in the ground and figure out where I was going. And I was still making work. Um, and since then, I really haven't looked back. I mean, I've been really pushing the limits on my work. Like I've made work that is just super raunchy, super intense. Kind of like what we were talking about the other day. Like a lot of the time, it's more relatable when it's just like the rawness of an experience. And I always, when I was drinking and when I was an alcoholic, I always connected to songs that were depressing or about like substance abuse. And even if they're really sad, it made me happy because I felt like someone could articulate a feeling that I had that I couldn't express. And so as I was building my work, I kind of like reflected on that. I'm like, why can't I be someone who can articulate feelings through visuals? I don't see a lot of it out there. And when it is, it's very biased towards like a gender or a race. And like, obviously, there's nothing wrong. Like, I totally support that. But like, I don't see a lot of things about kind of like this substance abuse. Or even like if you want to get specific, like a male depression state of mind, because men are really supposed to be strong and these very like strong support systems for everybody. Like we can't be expressive. And I'm just kind of like, well, why can't I do that with my work? And so I've pushed the limits on some paintings. Like when I would feel a certain way, like I would just put it on a canvas. Um, I don't know if I can share stuff, if I can
Yeah,
do screen sharing. So
yeah,
can you see all these?
yeah, man. I've already checked it all out. I've already, because I follow you. I see a lot of this
Awesome.
stuff. I see the roulette wheel one there. I've always been a little bit fascinated with that one.
But these are kind of the works that I started making when like I really embraced the sobriety thing, like
Yep.
kind of at the end of my relapse rather than before. But this is an installation of the gambling one. It's really my favorite. So this originally, this was intended to be a diptych that were opposed from each other. So if you were a viewer in the middle of them, you were looking at them in
Yep.
the middle. And so like the idea behind it is like these figures are playing a game of roulette, and as they spin the wheel, it's called love is a game. So they're playing a game of love, and at like you can't really control the outcome of it all the time. So as they're spinning this game of roulette, all these words are supposed to be Latin phrases with like relationship terminology. So like sex, gift giving, things like that. And as they land on something, they get these words that are supposed to be like love scars.
Yeah.
So like as you can see, the male figure has a lot more of them and a lot more intense ones, and the woman has less. And then the woman also has uh like more poker chips than the man, and then the man has like cigarette butts and
Yeah.
beer bottles. So like not only is he losing, but he's also accumulating an addiction problem.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of like the little cherry on top where it brings it together, because you have like the viewpoint of the two figures. Like he's smoking a cigarette and he's smoking a cigarette there.
Mm.
um and then so this was kind of like an earlier piece, uh like around the relapse time. As you can kind of see, the rips are a little bit more like the threads are kind of showing through. You might be able to see them in closer up ones, but these are kind of like they're kind of just like sitting there. They're vague. These this was a piece where, like, one of the ones that I ripped up, and it's just, like, 2 women drinking, kinda looking at the viewer as, like, an intimidation thing.
Yeah.
I called it Party Girls, and there's, like, Fast Life, that whole thing, and kinda playing off the male gaze in art history, where the male gaze is kinda like it's always been, like, the voyeurism, looking at a naked woman, but then, like, these women are looking back at you. This one I never get to show because no one ever gets to they're like, it's too intense, but this one is kinda like this idea of, um, like, male vulnerability towards female sexuality, and, like, there's, like, pills and a teddy bear, and she's eating Cheetos and vaping and stuff, and then, like, he's chained up and has, like, these cuts, and a lot of people think it's just like some type of BDSM pornographic thing, and I'm always
Yeah.
open to people being very interpretive. Like even though I have intentions of work, I never force people to believe certain things. I'm totally about open interpretation. This is just kind of like something that I felt, and this was actually the piece that I cut up when I was drinking and working on. Like this piece made me angry, and so I was like, I have to go rip up my other paintings, and it
Is
was
that
an
the pussy
intense
whipped?
time. Do what?
Is that the pussy whipped one?
Yeah, this one
Yeah.
is. And so it's just and also using that phrase, like, it's like you joke with your friends, like, "Oh, he's pussy whipped," but this is
Yeah.
like a literal
Yeah.
interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Um, and this one was one of my favorites before I made the diptych, but this was basically how I felt for a really long time, like, through relationships and stuff, like, this idea of, like, having, like, things, having materialistic items, having wealth, but like doing this like self-harm or like self-induced pain through addiction. Like this person has it all, but because of the whiskey glass in the bottle, like he's doing this like self-mutilation type
Yeah.
thing. And then like I did kind of like some ambiguity with the little $100 bills or smiley faces. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like happy and more of a depressing thing. And then just like playing with like ideas of tattoos, lean cup. Um, this one was one of the first ones I did of the series where it's like a figure. I called it Florida Boy. A lot of kind of like this idea of like showing off materialistic things, but like he's got monopoly money and like a ring pop and stuff, and like the
Yeah.
tattoos are Latin for like kind of being lost and depressed, and but he's like doing kind of like the rapper thing where he's showing off his grill, but it's like just it's all like a facade, it's all
Yeah.
fake, it's all like that type of thing. I know you like this one. um this one is kinda like just playing between, like, something intense like tattooing and then, uh, like, childlike mark making, and then it being on his back, so it's more of like a like, he doesn't really know what he's getting, but you have the ambiguity between, like, tattooing and childlike mark making.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one is a little bit. This was I want to take kind of like my ideas and do a still life of it. So it was like these objects that I was given from an ex lover, and then I'm like, I like these things make me angry because she told me. She's like, oh, I thought that people give gifts when they love someone. I'm sorry, I didn't really mean it, and it like made me so angry. And this was during like my relapse period, so like
Mhm.
I wanted to illustrate it in a certain way. Um, this is part of the diptych right here, and then this one as well. And this one, you might know who this is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that little one there.
yeah, I needed a model, so I asked her to ask Raven to send me some imagery of what she think would be a good interpretation, and it's basically like a figure in a straight jacket with like designer labels on it, so being like confined by the like the um, like fashion labels, high end, like people living outside of their means.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and then So this was kind of like playing with childlike things. Someday I'll come down. He's partying. This one kind of like the same Monopoly thing, like kind of like the same intimidation stare. Um, let's see. This one is kind of just more of like an expressive piece that I wanted to do without the in your face thing. This is a play. This is actually going to be a diptych once I get it together. This is supposed to be a guy eating gummy bears, and he's just like at that point where it's like, oh, it hasn't hit me yet, like edibles. And I know this is like in the way, but all of the gummy bears are kind of sad, and they have like their legs and heads eaten off. And he's just kind of sitting there. And so the diptych, the second panel, is supposed to be like the other way around. Like all of the gummy bears are like evil and happy, and he's spazzing out, having a super hard trip.
Okay. Yeah, cool.
This one is kind of like the Zephyr Hills water bottle, but I replaced it with the phrase meth and pills because it's kind of like a little thing that it's a phrase that in Zephyr Hills, Florida, that's where they sell the water. Like you get Zephyr Hills water in Florida. It's what they sell in gas stations and stuff, but it's kind of like a really drug ran town. So, and like everyone says like meth and pills instead of Zephyr Hills. So I put that there, and he's like hitting this GB, smoking weed, he's coughing, and it's going all over the place.
Yeah.
Another tattoo piece that I did. This is kind of like playing with just the idea of a mirror. Like I don't know if you know Velasquez or some of the old classical painters who played with like looking into a mirror and then having the reflection so the viewer can kind of like see what the artist is looking at. Like
Yeah.
before surrealism was ever a thing.
Yeah.
And I think this is there's one more, but this is like this is what I did for my thesis. It's like 90 inches by, so basically like I don't know what the measurements are in Australia, but basically uh 5 feet by 8 feet, about that. And I was basically playing with like how do you remove imagery altogether and how do you use objects. So I went in and like sewed objects, like uh, I used a matte black paint to recreate leather on a canvas, and then I added all these objects like condoms and stuff to kind of put the idea between pain and pleasure.
Yeah.
um, and then I want to show you these real quick because these are what kind of led me to what I'm making now. um, So this piece is kind of like this idea of someone being passed out like an overdose,
Yep.
but like no one's really paying him much mind like or care. But the idea behind this is supposed to come from the Luncheon on the Park painting, the Impressionist painting, where you have nude and clothed figures within the same picture plane. And so I wanted to figure out how to do that, and so I did kind of like this Miami Beach skyline with like this
Pretty
guy
true,
and
right? That's what
do what?
society's about now. It's pretty true today. If someone ODs, people just take photos of them and walk past.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
our world.
so it's kind of like that, like representing that idea, and with like technology and people not caring, especially in a place like Miami that's so big, like
Yep.
people don't stop and help. And um so this is like a huge charcoal drawing I did. These were kind of like before I relapsed, so this was kind of like me really starting to express myself, all these paintings or drawings.
Yeah, I like that one there too.
Yeah, this one is kind of about idolizing like ideology, like different bodies. So I got like different. I have like Travis Barker from Blink-182's chest, and then
Yeah.
Black Bear's arms, Juice World hands, and then Sarah Fable's legs. So it's kind of like lust, wealth, and like popularity. And then I did a crown of thorns on top is kind of like the crucifixion from these worldly things.
Yeah.
And like I use my face, so it's like a self portrait.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is just something like I was playing with collage, beach life, kind of like playing with illusion, like things that are usually like um like billboards or advertisements and dulling them down, making it like you usually see those types of things. New York's a perfect example. You'll see like a Balenciaga advertisement, but then there's like a homeless guy
Yeah,
on the ground
yeah,
on a cardboard box, and it's
always,
just
always in
yeah.
LA the same because I lived in LA for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. I remember first time I went to LA, I saw someone taking a dump like in a vacant uh like shopping center. I'm just like, oh man,
Yeah,
this place
man.
is
Yeah.
real.
We used to Raven's mother and I used to run down. There was a homeless guy in Sunset Boulevard. He lived in this vacant allotment for years, and half the time he'd be naked. And he was just filthy, black, dirty. And at Christmas time, we'd get a Christmas hamper, and we'd run down and we'd give it to him in this vacant allotment. It was like a big hole in the ground in the middle of Sunset Boulevard. And he'd go, yeah, fucking, and he'd abuse us.
Oh man.
The hamper, and then we'd run away. We'd laugh, but every Christmas we were there, we went and took him a hamper. Food,
Yeah.
alcohol, and cigarettes, and everything there. And we'd drop it off and we'd run away, and he'd sort of abuse us, but and then he'd come back and be there eating. Be like, how cool was that? Yeah,
Like he's never talked to like a wild man in the woods or
yeah,
something.
man. It was like that. It's in the middle of Sunset Boulevard, downtown LA. In the middle of
And
yeah,
it's crazy, like even
Hollywood.
the name Sunset Boulevard, like you think of it in like Hollywood and
Yeah, it's
all
Hollywood,
this
brother.
stuff.
And there's
But
a
it's
homeless
just
man that lived in that vacant lot for years. I'm talking
oh man,
3 or 5 years that I knew him there.
that's crazy.
Yeah, there was Sunset Tattoo, then there was the House of Blues. Across the road was the Comedy Store. All these famous people pulling up in their limousines. And this homeless guy lived downstairs in a vacant lot.
Yeah,
It was just
I love
crazy.
it.
Yeah, it was
I mean,
great.
it's the reality of it. I mean, you I would definitely say too, like that's a lot of what I try to focus on in the work, especially nowadays that I've kind of like dulled it down a little bit because it's like the idea of like high class, low class, or high
Yeah,
culture, low culture, like you have it intertwined in so many different areas. And it's like like you have people chasing dreams and like at the same time like people walking in business suits in these really nice or like really hyped up places like LA or New York, but then you have bums on the side of the road and like people just like I saw a TikTok video the other day where a guy didn't have shoes on, he had ripped pants, and he was like talking to some lady on the subway who was eating rice, and he just kind of like creeped over to her 2 times and then smacked it out of her hand and like ran off the subway.
I've seen that.
And like just to see that type of stuff is
Yeah,
like it's such a reality, and it like I don't know, I think that sometimes it needs more attention than it actually does. Same thing with the painting that or the drawing that we were talking about with the guy on the beach, like same concept. People like they don't really have any empathy for those types of lifestyles.
no, no.
um, but I'm almost done blowing through these real quick.
That's
uh,
good.
This one just kind of like literal illustration of addiction.
Yeah,
It's charcoal colored pencil. This is a sculpture I made about kind of like social media. He is holding like this dead rose behind him, and when I set it up at galleries, the rose, it's a real rose, so it decays over time and turns black, and the petals fall. So it's kind of like playing with time, and then
yeah,
the phone it has this loop of him going through social media and liking everything.
yeah,
So it's like focusing on technology as the tangible things are dying behind you. This one's an interesting one because I actually use my ripped up things from my DUI and use them as collage elements to bring the triptych together, but it's just like playing with different styles of drawing and collage, that type of thing. This is kind of like a just like labels, like very direct illustration of label ideas. I This piece in particular kind of broke me out of playing with like I was always a realistic painter, and so this kind of broke me out of that
uh-huh,
playing it safe thing, being more expressive. Which, if you look at my paintings nowadays, it's like they're way more like expressive brushwork rather than playing it real smooth.
I like this. I like the new style better. Sorry.
I do too. It's just like
You do it
it's
all the
more
art I
texture.
own.
It's just more lively, and especially because you have these moments that are very serious, and then you have vivid color. It it's just really
Portrait
great.
painters and things like that. I think I'll just take a photo.
Yeah, exactly, and
I'll just
that's
take a
kind
photo.
of like what I believe as well. Like if you want something super realistic, take a picture of it.
Yeah, exactly. You want realism? Take a photo.
Yeah,
I want something creative. I want something raw. I want something that yells out, "Look at me! Look at me! Don't look away! Don't you dare look away! You look at me!" And then I want people to go
exactly.
like, "Wow, I didn't notice that part. Oh, look at that bit there." Something
Especially
like
when
that.
they're just really big in your face, because then
Yeah,
it's just like most of the time you can't even blow a picture up to that
yeah,
size. So I love it.
yeah. No, it's good.
Um,
I'm so
this
proud
one
of
is just kind of like a thing that I did with playing with like really poppy colors and Xanax bars, and kind of like the idea of a
yeah,
panic disorder being chained by Xanax, and the heart being the center.
yeah,
This is actually the first piece I ever made that led to this work. Like, I was always just making things just to make them. This is the first expressive piece I ever made. It's kind of like choosing your path with like positive and negative
yeah,
labels. This one, pretty direct, being addicted to different things. And this one I think will want to be one of my all-time favorites ever. It's like the first piece I ever did that I kind of like put my vulnerability out there, like right after my first DUI, and I kind of forgot about it. I
yeah.
took my
Right.
first DUI and ripped up all the documentation, and then did kind of like this, like down the middle life and death thing.
Yeah,
And it's pretty big. It's like not as big as my other pieces, but I really like it. It's something that I don't think I could ever sell,
yeah. Cool.
especially because yeah.
Yeah,
But that's about it. I know I talked a lot back and forth, but I get so excited, and um, how do I?
you've come such a long way. You did me a drawing many years ago. A little drawing. Remember for my company logo?
Yeah, I actually still have that in a
Yeah, I still
portfolio
have it too. I still have the
somewhere.
original. Yeah, I still have the original drawing from the car company for Sugarman
Uh,
Classics, man.
yeah,
So cool.
I'll send that over to you whenever I find it, and you can keep it.
Yeah. I remember I was like, "Yeah, okay, give me a drawing, give you an idea," and I really loved it. I was like, "That was so cool."
Yeah,
It was
this
cool.
is the skull in the car.
Yeah, yeah, with his arm out
It's
the
on
window.
the top.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's cool. Mate, like life's full of twists and turns, and I'm so pleased you found recovery, or actually recovery found you.
yeah. I lived so long, never like even when it came to like art events, like I had to drink in those social settings, like drink the free wine or like do whatever. And I could never imagine my life like this. But then even when I was going to those events, I would say stuff that I would never say sober, and I would hang out with people all the time drunk. So
Yeah.
then when it was time to be sober, it's like how like I'm completely different and they don't really know me. And to be able to like live sober and do these things and people know who I am, like sobriety, recovery, all that stuff has just been the best thing that ever happened to me. And to be honest, if it wasn't for that second DUI
Mhm.
and basically about to lose my life, lose everything,
Yep.
I wouldn't be here. And I'm so thankful for that.
See, the good part is you got a lemon and you made lemonade.
Yeah,
A lot of people get a lemon and whinge about the taste. Don't drink the
absolutely.
shit, sell it. Make some money off it and then buy whatever you wanna eat.
Exactly. I
Come on,
say
man.
that all the time.
We're not victims, and it's really good not once have you try to make out like, "Oh, I was so unlucky." Man, life's life, and we make mistakes, we make some bad choices, we live with our choices, we own them, and we move on. And,
Definitely.
I say it all the time, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And this
Well,
whole
there's something
Go on.
I I think that a lot of the time, like I don't know if you'd call it chosen or destined, but some people are just they're kind of like set up to go, like alcoholism, for example, like you're
Mm,
born with that.
yeah.
And you'll never know until you take your first sip of alcohol. Some people are alcoholics and never take a sip of alcohol, so they
Yep.
don't know.
Yep.
But it's like to know that, and then like you said, with the lemonade thing, or taking your adversities and doing something with it.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you have this podcast, for instance, like I think that too many people sulk and they're just like, poor me. But if you can learn to take that, you can be an example for other people. You can do
Yeah.
something amazing with it.
You know, we have a saying, pour me, pour me, pour me a drink.
I
You know,
love that.
like,
Exactly.
that's one of my sayings, pour me a drink, and butts are for butt bins, I have I have a million sayings. I got a young guy that I've been mentoring for a long time. I actually met him in prison when I got arrested in 2002, and he was only 17. And so now, fast forward 20 years, he's 37, and we're celebrating his 11 years clean next month. We're going to the football together. We're going to the same as your Super Bowl, our AFL grand final. I've got a couple of tickets given to me from a client's family who I look after. So, everything happens because you help people. Everything I've got is because I help people. Even when I went to prison, I helped people and I stayed clean. Like everything I have today is because I help people. And everything I say is because I've listened to other people who've helped people. And I really believe as long as you give more than you take, you'll be given more than you need.
Absolutely. I
It's all about
totally
giving.
agree.
The world's all about giving. And with art, I love art. I collect art. I got a full bodysuit, and that was art. It wasn't tattoos for me. I collected artists. I went all around the world and got all the best artists in the world at that era and said to them, this is roughly what I want. You do it. I never went there for a drawing and said, that's what I want. I said, this is what I want. You do it. And they were all like, oh, man, and I've been tattooed by the best in the world, like Philip Lou, Greg James, bloody, just looking at my body and I start looking at it, yeah, this guy here, Freddie Corbin, like, God, man, I've been Mario Barth, like some of the best artists in the States, and Horiyoshi, and, tattooed in Japan. And, I've been blessed. Why? Because I'm clean.
Absolutely.
If I wasn't clean, man, I'd be getting tattooed by some bum in B unit in the prison, getting fuck the police tattooed across my chest or some.
Yeah, and you can
Tattoo
tell the
like
difference
that,
between a prison tattoo and a regular tattoo. I mean, people say that you can't tell a difference, but I mean, when you see a prison tattoo, especially bodysuits of prison tattoos, it's just like it's
Yeah, man.
terrible.
I got buddies who tattoo in Los Angeles who were tattooists from the prison system, and they'll tell you, like the stuff they put in the prison was as good as they could put in because of the the equipment you're using. But when you haven't got new needles, you haven't got the good ink, you haven't got this, come on, man. It's like we have to have good equipment, and recovery is like that too. We have to have good equipment with recovery. We have to have an open mind. We have to have an accepting mind. We have to be reliable. We have to be consistent and congruent. These are the principles that made our recovery possible by having these demands, these principles that I work in my life, and that anyone who's in recovery needs to work in their life. We start to have this incredible self-worth and self-belief. And the lie changes in our head. You're worthless, you're useless, you're hopeless. That starts changing to maybe I can, to I know I can. I don't say try anymore. I either will or I won't.
Exactly.
And if I
And
don't, I did my best.
yeah, I mean, I think that kind of goes back to what I brought up with like hitting the rock bottom thing. Like when
Yep.
you are in that state, whether it's addiction or like a penitentiary type thing, like to be low, you're not scared to risk it all.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I've always admired you for, is because like you're bold with the things that you do. Like I've always seen you as like you own your own business. For instance, you're
Yeah.
doing this podcast, you reach out to people, like you were so giving when I was there. You were able to get me a surfboard so I could surf in Australia, and
Yeah.
like let me use one of your cars. And I mean, I had the best time. And I don't know, to be able to do this podcast is just like it I want to share my story so bad to so many different people, and I do it through art, but it's like I don't want to just shove my story down people's throats
As I
unless
said to you, I've already started putting some wheels in motion to try to work out to get you to come to Australia and do a show here.
yeah, I would
I
love
think
that.
it's so cool. But we just got to work out. I was talking to V about it last night. We've got to work out, whether the best to come to Queensland, it'd be best to come to Sydney. And I was actually talking to Raven and Haley about it on Sunday, on Father's Day. They were over here,
Yeah.
and I said, I want to get him to come here and we do a show here because your
I
work's
would love
really
that.
intense, and I like that. You see my work. People used to come to my open house when I had houses for sale. My art used to just blow their mind. They'd be like, "Oh," because they don't see art for art. They see what their eyes see. They don't see what their soul sees and what their heart sees, because they're so conditioned of, it's a naked woman, it's pornographic. It's art.
Yeah.
I have a woman, the 3 paintings I got with the woman with the cancer, with her whole heart's ripped open, the heart's open. Do you remember that one? There's a 3-part series, and she had cancer and she died. She was a
Yeah.
friend of mine. And people just see the vagina and the heart ripped open and that, and they're like, oh, it's very confronting. Look at what it is. It's a woman going through cancer who's an artist who's put her emotion and feelings. That's why I've got those 3 paintings. They're her 3 best pieces. And many years later, they try to buy them back. Her family tried to buy them back. And I said, I'm not a pawn shop. I'm not a pawn shop. I'm not 7-Eleven. You can't buy them back. Because she passed on. And then her husband realised that I had the best art, the best work. And it was like, oh, would you sell them back to us? And I said, no. I bought them. They're mine. I own them. And they asked, can we borrow them and put them in a show? And I said, yes, as long as you sign a document saying that you've borrowed them. And if you lose them, there's X amount of dollars you have to pay. They never ever come and got them because I think they're going to steal them.
Yeah.
But
I mean, people don't realize, like, I think people look at films, for instance, and it's this chronological timeline. So you're kind of forced to follow, and there's always sex, there's always drug abuse, and like even killing or scary movies, like it's so vivid, but people don't sit on that moment because it's this timeline. But art is something that you have to sit with, and as you sit with it, you're confronting your subconscious and inner self-awareness, and people are afraid of that. And I think that that's something that I think that's why people like us appreciate it so much, is because we've not only discovered that part of us, but we've learned to embrace it. It's kind of like when you are in these recovery groups, everyone always laughs about what they did, like their drunken mistakes. And to the general public, it's like, why is that funny? And it's like, it's the way, it's like,
because we relate to it.
Yeah.
We relate to that. It's like, oh, yeah, I've done that shit. Yeah, oh, yeah. I talk sometimes, about because alcoholism and drugism is not, the chemical's not the problem. We're the problem. Our thinking's the problem. That's what I teach. I don't have, I'm a drug counsellor. My company says transformation consultant. So what I'm doing, I'm transforming your thinking. You seen the business card?
I haven't seen them. I love that.
Yeah, that's it.
It has like a little marble.
Man. Yeah,
that's awesome.
And because I teach people, it's not the drugs the problem. You can put a bottle of scotch on your counter; it'll never cause any harm. You put it in your body; it's a whole different ball game. So who caused the harm? The bottle of scotch or you? You did.
You're absolutely right.
I say it all the time.
Yeah, because why can some people go out and have one drink, and then other people go out and they just don't stop until they pass out or throw up?
Yeah. One was never enough.
Do what?
One was never enough.
Never.
And the fact that you... a bottle of wine, Chris, you know my wife, she opens a bottle of wine, she'll have that much out of a bottle of red, put the lid back on and put it in the fridge. And I think, why would you do that?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
You're just going to be tired in an hour. Drink the whole thing.
Yeah, like it'll go off. It'll lose its bubbles. She goes, it's got no bubbles. I say, see, you've left it open too long. She just got home. Yeah, man, so, yeah, and, the whole thing about recovery for me is we only have to do it for one day.
Yeah.
And it's like when you're in prison, you do your prison sentence one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the most two boring things in my whole life have been active addiction and prison. There's, I relate prison to using heroin, a waste of life. A waste of life, just complete waste. Nothing good comes out of using drugs. Nothing. Nothing good comes out of drinking alcoholically, nothing. And when we get clean, we have all this energy and all this experience and wealth of knowledge I believe we're obligated to share. That's why I started this podcast. I don't do this podcast to make money. I have money. That's not why I do the podcast. I don't want to make 2 cents off the podcast. If I made money off the podcast, I'd donate it to a single mother's alcohol rehab or something. I really would, because I don't, that's not my motivation. My motivation is not about that. My motivation is to get the message out to someone who's still suffering, who goes, wow, I listened to this young guy, artist, and I listened to what he said, and I related to what he said. Okay, that was cool. I got something out of this. I get so much good feedback from my podcasts. I had a DJ ring me last week. He messaged me. Then I rang him. He said, this is a true story. It's coming up next week, so you'll see it. He's a DJ guy and pretty popular too, apparently. I don't even know him. I'm not into that stuff. He's he's a hip hop guy. And he said, I've been asked to do, he's got his own podcast company. He's got his own podcast for music. And he said, can I come on your show and do a show with you? He said, I'm 30 days clean. I want to come out, but I want to come out on your show. Which is,
amazing.
It's a compliment.
Yeah.
He's a 40-year-old man. And he's got his own business. He's got his own hip hop show. He's been traveled I don't know if it's the world or he's traveled a lot, and he's pretty famous apparently. He makes his own music. And he said to me, I'll make you some beats for your show. And I said, yeah, if you do it, thank you. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Because I've got no motivation I don't do things for reward. My reward's doing it,
And there's something about when you do something that you love, all the success follows it. And you don't really do something that you love for the success. You do it because you love it. And it seems like, I remember when you started this, or at least it seemed, because like I found out about it and I started following you months ago.
Yeah.
And like now your following is growing. You have all these people on your podcast, and I don't know. It's just like one thing's leading to another, and it's like a combination of it being meant to be and changing the world one step at a time.
I believe 100%.
The fact that the internet is a thing and you're able to utilize that, like it's just a tool for the bigger picture.
That's 100% correct. That's 100% correct. And I've come to, I didn't make, when I went away, when I went to prison, the internet was for porn. That's all the internet was for. There was no Google. There was no Safari. There was none of this YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. There was none of that stuff. 2002, I got arrested. I had a flip phone, a Nokia flip phone. That was the best you could buy at the time. Fast forward 10 years, 2012, I get released. My friend hands me an iPhone. I go, what the hell is that? And then they joined me on Facebook. That phone beeped all night from all around the world, because all of a sudden I'm on Facebook. Everyone knows I'm being released from prison. And I wanted to smash that thing because I didn't know how to turn it off. And I didn't know what it was. Beep, 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 friend request. I'm thinking, what? I had 5,000 friends within a year.
That's crazy.
I had 10 people visit me in 8 years in prison. Where were they? Where were those 5,000 people? And I wiped it off. I wiped Facebook. So after 2 years, I wiped Facebook off because I thought I'm not using this anymore. And then I went without for a few years. And then I realized, wait a minute, I can use this. Then when I started this company, The Truth About Addiction, I realized, I love recovery. I love people being clean. I hate drugs. And I got arrested for drug smuggling and all that stuff. And, I don't justify it. And I don't ask for forgiveness or, I know what I've done. I know what I didn't do. And I know where my life is. But I I realized I could use social media as a platform to reach more people. And I have a story to tell. I have a story to tell. I tell it on a daily basis. I'm helping people save lives. And all I do is plant seeds, man. That's all I do. It's up to them whether they nurture it. It's up to you whether you water it.
Yeah.
I can't come to your joint and water it and put it out in the sun. You've got to do that shit, man. So what I say, my job is to plant seeds. But I guarantee anybody that I always say this, all my clients, I guarantee two things. Three things. I guarantee three things. If you continue using, your life will get worse. If you stop using, your life will get better. And if you do my program, I'll fuck you using. I'm not saying you won't ever use again. I'm saying that you'll never use happily again. Because I'll give you information and steps that you can change. And, I like that part. I say to them, once somebody's done a 3 or 4 week course with me, I say, you will never use happily again. I've done my job. They go like, what? I say, well, you will never be able to use again and justify to yourself, oh, I don't know any better. Because now you do.
It's like getting a taste of freedom in a way.
Yeah.
You just get a little taste of it. And once you do, it's like, it's not as pleasurable because it's kind of like cigarettes is a really good example because I've been on and off cigarettes for a while, and like I've quit smoking cigarettes ever since I got sober. And if I ever do like go out to the bar, because I can go to the bar with my friends now and not drink, like it's just, I don't know how. It's just like I just know. It's amazing. And so sometimes I'll be like, just to kind of like join the social thing, like I'll just smoke a cigarette. And after that one cigarette, like I can smell that I smell bad and I can feel it in my lungs and like my mouth feels disgusting. And used to, I could never do that. Like it was so hard to break cigarettes.
Yeah.
And that's just like a small example because it's not like intoxicating like drugs and alcohol, but just to like be away from cigarettes for like 2 years and then smoke one, it's like, why did I ever smoke this?
Yeah. It's like everything. I hate the smell of cigarettes. It repulses me. I'd go to a nightclub. I've got to come home and have a shower straight away. I've got to wash my hair. I've got to take all my clothes off, throw them in another room. I can't be around that smell. It just stinks, Even if somebody smokes and they talk to you, it's like, Haley smokes now. She's smoking again. And she had to kiss me, and I say to her, get away from me, skunk breath. Shake hands with me, She goes, Dad. I say, mate, honestly, you smell like a butthole. Get away from me. How I talk to my kids. But, look, man, I'm so proud of you. I'm really, really proud of you, mate. I am. I'm incredibly proud of you. I was so happy when I started seeing your artwork and I started seeing you doing what you love, because if you do what you love, you never have to work a day in your life.
No. And honestly, I love what I do. I mean, I sell a little bit of artwork. Most of my income comes from t-shirts. Like I screen print t-shirts. And I mean, I run my own eBay store. I do custom jobs for local businesses and I absolutely love it. And I have time to paint whenever I want. Like I'm living the dream, and it's, I don't know, it's just like the time we live in between social media and now that I am sober, it's like all this stuff combined. It's just like I can finally live the life that I'm wanting to live, and I'm about to turn 30 and I'm going to go to New York for my 30th birthday. And so it's just like it's time to start that new chapter. And having this podcast with you is just the cherry on top because I'm able to kind of like talk about it, meet with old friends. It's great.
No, mate, thank you very much. It's been a really, really pleasure catching up with you. I'd like to say I'd come over to New York, but they won't let me back in America. I applied and they told me not to apply again.
Let's plan for me to go to Australia. And
we'll work on that. We will work on that.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.